What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel, per usual, coming to you live and coming to you live from the house, and coming to you live on my laptop, which is the first time I've actually been on a laptop in a long time. I feel like this is like a foreign idea, a new toy, so to speak, that I haven't used in quite a while. I wanted to hop on here and talk about obviously the Conor McGregor incident that took place at the UFC 223 Media Day, an incident that definitely shook up the MMA world, shook up the McGregor fan base, and shook up just everything. So wanted to hop on here and talk about that a little bit more detail than what I did in the last video. I was chilling over there on my bed, actually, in my last video, and I'm like, you know what, I gotta get on my desk and do these the proper way. So I wanted to hop on here and talk about a topic within this whole bus attack situation that would definitely address how I would punish Conor McGregor if I were in Dana White's shoes. I want to play that angle a little bit and kind of address that a little bit and say, hey, if I were in Dana White's shoes, how would I punish Conor McGregor? Now, there's a few precursors to all of this stuff. There's obviously the fact that Conor McGregor is the biggest star that the UFC's ever had. There's obviously to the fact that he's not even just the biggest star that the UFC has ever had. He's probably one of the biggest stars currently in the world of sports, one of the most recognizable faces on planet Earth, due to the success that he had in the octagon and obviously commercials and, sometimes dabbling in things like that. The guy has just been a cultural phenomenon the last 5 years. So, to say the least, you're in a really tough spot right now if you're Dana White. You really are. And I often do, on my podcast, sometimes throw some shade at Dana White and sometimes say, well, he does this wrong, he does that wrong. But for the most part, he's actually handled the situation the right way. He's gone on the shows and talked about how he's not really dipping his toes in this mess, in these messy waters in terms of Conor McGregor. He's not going to go out of his way to stick up for him. He's not going to do the things that he normally did for Conor, which he did quite a lot for Conor that allowed Conor to become a millionaire. He propped him up. He built him up. He helped promote his career, obviously, as the UFC president and as Conor, as a UFC fighter. He allowed Conor the ability to take a step outside the octagon and fight Floyd Mayweather in a crossover event that was the second highest purchase pay-per-view ever. So, to say the least, Dana has done quite a lot for Conor McGregor, and now Conor kind of burned him, and with this instance, losing fights on a card that everyone was excited for, and obviously the biggest name again that the sport has ever had is in a situation where he is in prison or was in prison and was released, and obviously went to court today. So not a good situation, to say the least, a situation that Dana White desperately did not want to have to deal with, a situation that I think generated a lot of negative publicity towards the UFC and kind of might have proven a point to the small group of people out there that say that most MMA fighters or most boxers are thugs and are idiots, where that's not really true. Most of these fighters that box or that are in the UFC actually do have intelligence. They might have fought their way to the top for reasons to get out of their tough community, and that's a misconception that I think Conor McGregor might have actually proven right with his actions. They say, well, he's not really being a good role model, and that is a stain to the sport because they propped him up, they promoted him, and then he repaid them by acting like this. It was his responsibility as a two-time champion at two different weight classes at the same time, as a face of Ireland, the fighting pride of Ireland, to represent himself in a better way, represent the sport in a better way. And he didn't do that. He actually did the exact opposite of that. And I think that that's a real shame. So, due to those things that I've just stated, me personally, I would have to punish this guy. I would have to make an example, so to speak, that this situation where a fighter crashed a media day, a bus, due to the fact that his opponent, uh, future opponent, I think, down the line at least, fellow division, contender, um, had an altercation with Artem Lobov, who's Conor McGregor's buddy, training partner. And, Conor would be the first to admit that he probably didn't get to where he is without having a training partner like Artem. And Artem would definitely agree to the fact that Conor has gotten Artem everything that he's had in his UFC career. Artem probably wouldn't even be in the UFC if it wasn't for Conor McGregor. He's 13-14, one of the worst fighters via, record wise, in the UFC still, obviously outside of CM Punk. So, all joking aside, Artem was very lucky to be in this position, fighting on a card again, a big card like this one. Artem and Habib had the altercation, but Conor took it way too far, and in the process, Michael Chiesa out, Ray Borg out, Artem Lobov taken off the card due to his actions that were extended throughout this confrontation. So Conor really did a number on this card with this incident, and this is something that is unprecedented. This is something that I have never even thought would happen, between two UFC fighters, as well as in any realm. I never thought that this was a possibility. So prefaced all my statements by saying that. I preface my statements by saying that Conor is a huge draw, and that puts Dana White in a really really tough spot, in terms of how to punish him. But me personally, I honestly, with everything that he did this week, in causing injuries to other fighters and things of that nature, I would never look at him as a draw again. To be honest, I would look at him as just another fighter, because looking at him as a draw and as above and beyond what the other fighters are has led to this moment, has led to Conor doing things that are not normal, acting in a way that he is above everybody, that he is the face of everything, and the end all be all of the fight game, which isn't true. There's a lot of other fighters that are dying to be promoted the way he was. And you don't get that opportunity. You get chosen to have that opportunity. And there's things about him, character traits, that allowed him to be very promotable. But this is not one of them. And I would suspend him for a calendar year, the day of the incident, which was yesterday, to next year. 2018 suspended, 2019 suspended, with no public appearances allowed by the UFC, which he is still under contract for. The UFC would prohibit him from any public appearances whatsoever, which was what I would do in this situation. Would not allow him to be a member of the UFC for a full year. His contract would get frozen. Wouldn't necessarily be a cut situation, but it would be a suspension. And fining him really doesn't do much of anything, because they've allowed him to get the money that he has, by letting him fight guys like Floyd Mayweather, by letting him do the things that he's done in his MMA career and outside the cage. Really think about that. They let him box. They let him do another sport, and they actually cross promoted that event. So I have a very tough time thinking that, oh, Conor did this right. He did this. He did that. No, this guy made a huge mistake, and it needs to be proven that, and shown, a line has to be drawn in the sand. That's all it is. That's what I'm really trying to say. Dana has to draw a line in the sand. If it were me, I would draw a line in the sand. No fighting for a year. I would suspend him for a full year. I don't give a damn how big of a draw he is. The company sold for $4.25 billion. I think they're doing all right. They can build other stars. The UFC is not going anywhere, despite what everybody's been saying lately, that it's, the shit show of shit shows. I, to an extent, agree with that, but I also disagree with that because it is still the NFL of MMA, and they still have the best fighters on planet Earth. I'm sorry, Bellator. I'm sorry, ONE FC. I'm sorry to Metamoris and all these other organizations out there. The UFC is still number one, and regardless of whether Conor McGregor is a part of it or not, it will still be number one in the world of mixed martial arts as the number one mixed martial arts organization. So I don't want to hear things like, oh, well, he's such a huge draw and he does this for the sport and he does that for the sport. Bullshit. He doesn't do anything for the sport. He hasn't fought in 2 years in mixed martial arts, and he acted in a way that injured other fighters and prohibited other fighters from making the money that they deserved to earn, to have the right to earn. Prior to that moment, all those guys were healthy. Michael Chiesa was fine. Ray Borg was fine. Now they're not. And Ray Borg could quite possibly have some sort of an eye injury. So this is not, he had shards of glass in his eye. This is not a good situation. It's just not. And the fact that there are still fans out there that say, well, Habib started it with Artem Lobov, that was called a scuffle. There wasn't someone trying to throw giant guardrails through a bus window and then throw a dolly through a bus window. I'm ashamed, to be honest, because Conor was one of my favorite fighters. I watched his rise from 2013 till now, and I remember watching one of his fights on Facebook. I think it was his fight with Marcus Brimage. Was on Facebook Live. And I watched that fight, and I watched him in Cage Warriors win his lightweight title. That's when I really started watching him. And I thought, this guy's really special. He can talk, he dresses well, talks very well, speaks very clear, and obviously has the gift of gab. Thought he was going to be a huge star. Thought he was going to represent the UFC the right way, defend his titles, and not hold up divisions. And I was wrong. He didn't defend his titles. His most high-profile fight was in a boxing ring. He really hasn't done a whole lot for the sport of mixed martial arts these last couple years, in my personal opinion. You can take it for what it is. Disagree with me, agree to disagree with me, whatever. It's up to you guys. You guys are tuning in. You guys watch the videos. You guys say whether you think I'm right or wrong. That's okay. It's just my opinion. And there's a lot of facts and a lot of history to back that up. So all in all, I really think that this situation is going to work itself out eventually. And I hate to say it as well, but I do think Dana is only going to give Conor a little bit of a light slap on the wrist, which is a real shame due to the fact that this man caused harm to other fighters while trying to cause harm to another fighter. And that's as simple as I can put it, as best as I can put it. I'm ashamed to root for this guy at some point. I don't want to root for him. I have a tough time with that post this incident. So we'll see what happens. But to say the least, if it were me, I would suspend him for a calendar year, April 6, 2018 to April 6, 2019. Not allow him to make any public appearances representing the UFC, and basically ban him from any events within this next year. Allow Habib and Al to fight it out for the for the lineal lightweight title, and just move on, because this guy is only gonna hold them back. People say, well, the Habib fight is so big, which it is. It's the biggest fight in UFC history, even before all this stuff with Ireland versus Russia. That storyline sells itself. But would you really want to promote this guy if you're a promoter right now? Being in Dana White's shoes right now, it's pretty tough. So I'm heading out. I got to go to bed. I actually got to get up and work in the morning. But I want to hop on here on the YouTube channel now that I got my laptop up and running again. I'm very excited. I got some software that I'm going to be using on here to have some guests on as well. So stay tuned, stay up to date, and subscribe. Definitely want to subscribe to the channel so that way you can tune into all the podcasts. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take. Take care.